Why do you think loan financing is important to independent media in emerging democracies?
Well, of course, it's important because otherwise there's no capital to get these industries started. What capital there is going to come at high rates or at some sort of high social cost. And by providing it, MDLF gives them an opportunity to avoid either political patronage or financial burdens they can't possibly meet. And by doing that, it allows them to actually get their editorial operations going, maintain their integrity, which is always the hard part, and grow a business and give it a chance to succeed.
So what's the relationship, do you think, between grant financing and loan financing? Is there room for both?
Well, there is room for both because some things are just not going to merit a loan. That is to say, some things have such the economic character of a public good that they're not going to generate revenues. That's why in different countries they go by different names, but we call them nonprofits. They do things that the market will not provide. And in fact, news would be one of those things. News has many of the qualities of a public good. If I make a broadcast program and send it out on the air, I earn the same amount of money if one person watches it or 1 million people watch it. So trying to finance media goods is very difficult to begin with. But there will be some things that are just not going to generate a return, but maybe have a very high public good value. And it's also possible, of course, that in some economic environments, the opportunity to generate revenues just aren't there yet. It's not ripe. And so grants are a way to kickstart something that might yet later qualify for a loan and be a good risk.
And what about equity investment? What sort of role does equity investment have in these types of independent media businesses?
This is not so much my field, but I would imagine that it matters very much who your equity partners are. If you look in the United States, for example, at the problems that newspapers have had in the last year, where you have bankruptcy after bankruptcy, the problem is not that these firms are not making money. They're making money fine. However, they were purchased by people who leveraged the daylights out of these companies, and they simply cannot make their payments. And they can't generate the kinds of returns that Wall Street needs to see. Otherwise, these companies, many of them would be healthy, or at least not bankrupt. But in the United States, if you're looking at a publicly traded company where your shareholders and your equity partners expect you to generate 25% returns per quarter, that's just not going to happen. So the equity investment from a good partner, one that understands the business, cares about the products, it turns out, is going to be a huge benefit. Because otherwise you might have to seek equity partners who have no interest in your product or little patience with your business plan.
Do you see those sustainability problems in the West, in the
Yes.
US and Europe? Do you see that as spreading throughout the world?
I think sustainability problems have been in the news media business from the beginning. The problem now, leaving aside who owns them and the kind of returns that owners want, is that there's no advertising base. It's gone away. So the internet is the big problem there. You have classifieds, which were the big basis of revenue for American newspapers for decades, gone. They've gone to separate sites. So that leaves, what do? Subscription revenues can only go up so high if they can go up at all. New forms of advertising, fine, but you're now competing with thousands of other potential advertisers, some much more targeted than you are. So I do see that spreading this way. When you add that to difficult political and economic environments, sure, it's going to make their life more difficult. At the same time, I don't know, say, for example, Russia as well, obviously, as many of MDLF's clients do. But perhaps one of the things that makes the market still work for them well in terms of advertising is that they don't face so much competition for that advertising. And at some point, they may. New content producers will come along, and it might just be that competition is a more difficult burden to carry than even, say, political repression. But that's just a story that's going to have to unfold.
So you, overall, do you think you're an optimist or a pessimist?
Yeah, I heard that we had that discussion this morning, and the best answer was neither. I'm a realist. But I would like to be an optimist for the simple reason that, maybe the selfish reason that I've invested a career in journalism. I believe in it. I believe in the notion of public goods and the public interest. And when we were speaking this morning about these multiple channels of discourse now where everybody has a voice, the one question no one asked, but it's the obvious one, is not just what does this mean for journalism, but what does it mean for democracy? There is something to be said about a coherent public view, coherent public speech. The one thing that television still does very well is it gathers large numbers of people around things like political debates or political elections. And so I'm not convinced that even if we have all these new media, that it's a net plus for democratic governance or public discussion, but it's what it is. And the traditional journalists have to figure out not only what role to play there, but how to make it a financially viable go. So I think a lot of what journalists do now in terms of working with citizen journalists is what they've always done. They have to figure out new ways to aggregate audiences. If I can bring 50 bloggers into my tent and with them new readers, perhaps new advertisers, okay, maybe that's what replaces the lost advertising I used to have. But the channels keep multiplying. The competition just goes on endlessly. And we do have people now who self-select, of course. They read only those views that correspond to their own. Most of it opinion, very little news. A lot of citizen journalism is missing the journalism part. But all in all, we now have a sort of representative democracy that around the world that no one ever could have imagined. So I'll go out on a limb and say it's a good thing, even if as a business proposition it presents all kinds of problems.